Hello everybody, welcome back to Leeton. My name's Jason and this channel is all about our journey to try and become more self-sufficient in fruit, vegetables, eggs and maybe some honey. Now, you joined us at the beginning of the channel really, we're only 8 months in, so good time to subscribe. So please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button so you don't miss any more updates, and if you like the video, please click the like button too. Now today's video is all about parsnips, and parsnips can be awkward, let's put it that way. They don't have the best germination rate and they like some fairly friable soil, you know, they like to have loose soil with no stones and twigs and things like that in it. So they're not the easiest of crops to grow or to get started, but when they're started, they're a very good crop, easy to grow once they're growing, and very hardy, take cold temperatures, and they're a fantastic crop to eat, and they store really well as well. So today is all about parsnips, and this isn't a how-to video, it's a how I do video. So let's get on with it. So I start my parsnips every year in January, and I start them in these cardboard pots that disintegrate and just rot away into the ground. And the reason I do that is parsnips do not like to be transplanted. So if you were to start them in a seed tray and then prick them out and put them in pots and move them on and on and on, the chances are they're just not going to work. So I always start them in these, and I then plant the whole pot into the ground, removing the base of the pot when I do so. And the reason for that is parsnips put down a very, very long taproot, and that's the root that we all eat at the end of the day. So any obstruction in the way of that root can cause it to either split and fork, or go off at a funny angle, or even just turn into a totally deformed root system. And of course what we really want is nice long parsnips. So these parsnips here I sowed on the 5th of January. I put 2 in each pot, there's 10 pots, so I sowed 20 parsnips and only 4 have come through. And this brings me on to the second point. Parsnip seeds do not last very long at all. If you've got seeds from last year, by all means sow them, but you may find you've only got something like a 50% germination rate. If you've got seeds from the year before, that will probably drop to something like 20%, and so on and so on. So these actual seeds I sowed in January were Parsnip Gladiator F1, and the date was sow by 2022. And I had a germination rate 4 out of 20 seeds. That's not actually quite true, because I dug around in these pots just to see if anything was happening, and the 5th one was just starting to put a root out, look. So anyway, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to chuck these seeds away now, because that's a very poor germination rate, and I'm going to get my next packet with the next date on, which is these. White gem, good variety, and the date on these is sow by 2024. So these were probably bought last year. Now just be careful when you're buying parsnip seeds. We bought these last year in Wilco's, and it says sow by 2026. They'll probably be no good by 2026. So what I'm going to do, rather than reuse using new pots, is I'm going to reuse these, and then I'm going to do 10, so I've got 6 here, and I'll do 4 more, and later we're going to go plant these ones out. Because these are newer seeds, I'm going to go 1 seed per pot. So you'll notice that the compost in these pots is different to these. It is actually a different compost. They're both shop bought compost. The only difference is this one has a bit of vermiculite in it, because back in January my vermiculite hadn't arrived, so I couldn't mix it in with the compost. Not essential, you don't have to use it. So parsnip seeds are a very flat seed, not a lot to them, but they are big enough to sow individually, not like carrots and celery where you haven't really got much hope of doing that. And all I'm going to do, wrong tool, all I'm going to do is a hole about 10 millimeters deep, in the middle of the pot. Like so. And put 1 seed in each. If I can pick one up, there we go. 1. Just check the seed as you're picking it up, make sure it isn't split or damaged or anything like that. And that is really all I do. Now, parsnips take, or can take, that was good, wasn't it? Set them everywhere. Parsnips can take a very, very long time to germinate. For example, that one there took 4 weeks to come up. These, I mean, this one is literally just coming up and it's nearly 6 weeks. And that's in a room that is probably an average temperature of about 12 or 14 degrees. And the other thing about parsnips, don't even bother trying to sow them if you can't, if the temperature where you're going to sow them isn't 8 degrees or above, preferably 10 degrees or above, because they probably just won't germinate at all, and then they sit in the ground and probably rot. And that's why I'm not sowing these outside. I will probably start to sow directly into the soil outside mid-March, something like that, depending on the weather. But at the minute the soil is only about 3 degrees and it's just not warm enough for them to germinate. So this compost in these pots is quite damp. So I'm just going to water these ones. I would advise you to keep the compost damp as well, because if it starts to dry out and go hard, that just makes it harder for the parsnip to get its roots down, or root down. So, and the other thing is, these pots I bought yesterday are actually quite a bit taller than these, so that's a good thing. That gives you a little bit more time before you have to plant them out, because the root has got further to go before it hits the bottom of the pot. So that's the parsnip sown. I'm going to do a label. Parsnip, white gem, 10th of the 2nd. I always put the date on because it's just nice to know when you sowed things. And you know, parsnips take around, depending on the variety, depending on the growing conditions and depending on the weather, take between 4 and 6 months. In my experience, it's at least 6 months. And I'm in the Midlands, Shropshire, so roughly in the middle of the UK, of England, about 2/3 of the way down the UK. So I find, yeah, 6 months at least. And we will probably be harvesting these August, September onwards, because that's the beauty of parsnips. They store in the ground for so long, and they will survive cold weather and frosts, etc. So that's the next batch sowed. I'm going to put these on the windowsill over here. And they will live there now until they germinate. And once they've germinated, then they will be planted out. And that's what we're going to go and do now. We're going to go plant out the 4 that have germinated. Now it is early, the ground is still very cold. It could shock the plants and kill the plants because they're still very small. But if I don't go and sow this out, plant this out, all that is going to happen is the root is going to curl up in the bottom of this pot, and then the plant's no good anyway. So I may as well hedge my bets, plant it out, and hopefully it will still survive, and we will be getting 4 parsnips around July, end of July time. And that's an early crop for parsnips in the UK. So let's go give it a go. Okay, so if you've been following the channel, you'll know that we've recently got these raised beds operational, and they get slightly deeper as you go down. So that's the shallowest next, and the deepest. Now the deepest bed, although it would be good for parsnips, doesn't get a massive amount of sun at this time of year. The shallowest bed, bearing in mind we do have some rubble and pea gravel in there as well for drainage, so that's probably not quite deep enough for big parsnips, whereas the middle bed is perfect. So we're going to use this middle bed for parsnips to start with this year. And as you can see, the soil temperature, it isn't freezing. I know it isn't freezing, but I would say it's 2 or 3 degrees. And I am taking a big risk here with these very young plants, but as I already said, there's no point leaving them in the pots either. So we've got 4 plants of various stages of germination. I apologise if there's a bit of wind noise, but hopefully we'll be okay. So I'm going to come in probably 4 inches from the sides of the walls to give them room to swell up, and I'm going to plant them about 6 or 7 inches apart, something like that. And they're quite far apart, but bearing in mind the parsnips will probably swell at the top of the roots to the size of these pots, and I'll probably get another one in there at a later date. Just move them along a little bit, and I've got room for one more there then. And it's no different to transplanting anything else. Small hole, any stones and twigs, and then I'm going to tear the bottom of this pot away. You don't have to do this, but it helps the root. And if you see there, you can just see the root. It was just about to start to curl up in the bottom of this pot, and that's the largest seedling, and that's just starting to grow a mature leaf. Now I'm not going to add any kind of compost or fertiliser or anything to this soil. I've not grown in it before. It looks like really good soil. I don't want to upset its balance, if you like, when I don't know anything about it. So all I'm going to do is position that pot like that. Now, as I've said, this is early to be doing this. This could be a complete failure, but I like to push the boundaries and I like to try things. I like to experiment. And if it works, we get some early parsnips, and that can only be a good thing. And with these smaller ones, where the root isn't anywhere near the bottom, I could just leave the bottom of the pots on, but by taking it away, it does remove a barrier. So hopefully they will grow perfectly fine. Now, I have been hardening these off for a few days, so this isn't a complete shock for them. They haven't just come out of a warm conservatory and been dumped in cold ground. They have been hardened off a bit. But to help them as much as I can, I'm going to put one of these, just literally half a pop bottle over each one. Just twist them into the ground, and obviously these I will take away later in the year. And I'm going to remove the tops. Because I'm not expecting a hard frost for the next week or so. If the weather changes and it does look like we're going to get a really hard frost, I can come back out and put those on. So there we go, first the first things planted in the ground this year. The first parsnips this year. And we're just going to have to see if it's successful or not. Well, thanks very much for watching, guys. Yeah, we're just going to have to see on that one, aren't we? Is it going to work? But while I was filming that video, my seed potatoes arrived. So you know what's going to come in the next few days, don't you? Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you've liked the video. If you have, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Hit the notifications button and all of that stuff. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.